have been flocking into equities there. If we look at what the market's done, it is in fact up more than 100% this year compared with the second best performer, which was Indonesia, and that market up around about 40%. Now the country's bond market, if we look at that, it's also performed fairly well this year. 5-year dollar-denominated sovereign bonds, they were up almost 6%. They currently yield around about 5%. The question here, though, is this rally in the capital market supported by economic fundamentals? Prakriti Sofat is regional economist of Barclays Capital. She's joining us live from Singapore. Prakriti, let's put that question directly to you. Is it supported by economic fundamentals?
I would say yes. I mean, economic fundamentals in Sri Lanka currently are very strong. Growth was 8.5% in the second quarter, and we think for this it'll easily be 7.5%. And this is clearly coming on the back of 1/3 of the land area, which was never integrated into the economy, is now getting integrated after the end of the war.
You know, there is still some significant risks, obviously, with investing into Sri Lanka, and I think probably one of these, certainly that has been pointed out to me, is there are still some political risks which do remain in the country, you know, even though the civil war has now ended. Just how important are these risks going forward to you when it comes to economic reform?
Well, I think in the near term, these risks are perhaps not that big of a concern, given the fact that currently the economy is enjoying very strong economic growth, rising employment, and clearly wealth effects are positive as well because property prices are going up, and as you indicated, clearly equity market is going up. So that confidence is spilling over across the economy. But on a more longer term basis, I do think that there is need for greater devolution of power to the Tamil minority, because that at the end of the day was the crux of the problem which led to the civil war.
Absolutely. Alrighty, okay, let's talk about what you should be doing in this environment then in Sri Lanka. You know, we have seen interesting moves in the government bond market as well. It's not only equity investors that have done pretty well here. When we look at what the return is like, we've got the 5 years sitting at around the 5% level, 10 years around about 6%. You know, as my senior producer pointed out to me earlier on today, you know, while those yields aren't too bad when it comes to looking at investments, you can actually get better yields when you're investing in some of the other markets like Indonesia.
Well, I think it's a comparative which needs to be done. Now, obviously, in the local currency bond market, if you were to go into Sri Lanka, you're getting a yield of about 9.3% or so for the 10-year, which I think is attractive, given the fact that when you look at the fiscal dynamics in the country, they are on the right track, and clearly IMF support remains. On the dollar bond side, you know, they recently did the $1 billion bond auction, and which was very, very successful. It was oversubscribed by 6.5 times, and it has tightened a lot since it was priced at 625. So I think the opportunity is definitely there for Sri Lanka, because the growth story remains very positive. We are seeing external balances improve, and in fact we think that Sri Lanka would possibly be upgraded to BB- in 2011. So that, I think, will be priced in gradually into the bond market as well.
How important is this upgrade that we've had? Of course, we have had an upgrade from S&P. We've also got a Moody's rating now, and we didn't have one, of course, before.
Yes. Well, S&P actually upgraded to be positive, catching up with what Fitch had done back in October 2009, and now Fitch has put Sri Lanka on a positive outlook. I mean, we strongly believe that the sovereign has what it takes to get upgraded into, you know, BB- into 2011. If you look at the central bank and the government, they're actually targeting to improve the credit rating to investment grade in the next 4 to 5 years, and they've set a very high bar for themselves. But clearly indicates that policy direction is towards improving the fiscal debt dynamics, to continue to improve also the external balances of the economy to try and achieve that high grade. And we think the directionality of reforms is definitely there.
Okay, so if we're moving in the right direction, and we know that
yes.
the government is targeting a fiscal deficit here of around about 8% of GDP. Yep. That's down from more than 10% back in 2009. We do need, or the country does still need, some significant reform in order to get this in place. And I guess the question here is, going back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, when it comes to the risks that are still facing this country, can it do enough? Is it stable enough right now to move forward to actually hit these sort of forecasts? Also 7.5%, of course, for GDP that you mentioned earlier.
Well, I think on the fiscal side, we've already started seeing some reforms. The government is streamlining the excise and the tax bases. And I think for this year, the deficit target of 8% is achievable. Now, for 2012, they're targeting, under the IMF package, a deficit of 5% of GDP, which would be definitely a bit of a challenge, but clearly policy direction is there. In terms of what they need to do, they need to try and broaden the tax base, especially for VAT as well as personal income tax, and they need to start ensuring that the loss-making state enterprises become more profitable. That, I think, is very important, and we do see some policy inklings that the government wants to do this. On the growth front, which you highlighted, I have no doubt in my mind that Sri Lanka will be able to achieve growth of 7.5%. Agricultural output is increasing tremendously as the land areas which were not earlier being able to produce anything because of the war are now being able to. Transshipment activity is picking up a lot. Sri Lanka is very well located in the geography, and clearly tourist arrivals have sharply increased as well. Foreign direct investment, I don't need to say, but we have seen increased investment coming from China and India as well.
Yeah, all arrows pointing upwards, aren't they? Yeah, Prakriti, great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us to chat to us about that today.